Hello, Henshin heroes. It's Nathan, aka the Subro here. It's just me this week. Yet another time where it's just a solo stream from yours truly. Chris originally said he was going to be here, and then he told me I got off the phone with him a little bit ago, and he said that he's just had an absolutely insane week, and he needs to catch up. So that just wasn't going to happen. And Jake is busy being a good dad and taking his kids to go see Five Nights at Freddy's Part 2. Oh, well. So, like I said, just me this week. So it's probably not going to be a very long stream. So if you want to get your comments or whatnot in, start doing that now, because I have a feeling this will probably be done in maybe a half an hour at the absolute most, unless, like I said, we get a bunch of comments that I need to address. So let's talk about Ultraman Omega, because that's the first one I watched. I will admit I didn't see it until about 8:30 tonight Eastern, because I've been very busy today. I was at a ballroom dance competition here in Fort Wayne. I participated, but I was not competing. I was part of a formation that my studio, the Fort Wayne Ballroom Company, did. So that's what I've been doing most of the day. Last night I was on the Cellcast for yet another guest appearance. So that's why I didn't watch it last night. All that to say, got to it tonight. So honestly, with Omega, you know what? I'll be fair. I'll do what I normally do. I'm going to look up the stuff on it on the Ultra Wiki. I'm not going to show the monster because it's a monster we already know. It was Gabora. Gabora's been around for a while. He was in the original show, as we covered on the main podcast. So no need to get into that. But the official, sorry, I'm a little tired. The official synopsis, as I think I mentioned this last week as well, for this, and it's Ryunji, enraged. When Sayuki is away, an inspector who calls himself Sayuki's rival, Makoto Ryunji, arrives at the KSCT headquarters. News of the mysterious bamboo shoot kaiju appearance, sends Serato and the others out to investigate. However, the overbearing Ryunji rejects all of their opinions. Ellipses. To protect the city's peace and the pride of Team Uta, what will the decisive action taken by Ayumu, who has been who has been put in charge as acting leader? Yeah, because our normal leader is not here. Sayuki, she's not here. She's traveling abroad. So basically, we have a couple of interesting things going on with this. So we have, on one hand, we got kind of two. Well, it's really only one story, but it's one of those ones where the normal team leader is gone, someone else is put in charge, but then a new commander comes in and he's a weirdo. So, we have to deal with that. Okay. And, a mission comes up and shenanigans ensue, basically. It's another lighter episode. It's a fairly funny one. Ryunji's decent. I'll say that, right? Ryunji is decent as this kind of comical antagonist. He talks about how he's written a book that he says is going to become a standard mandatory text. What is this, a school? That everyone's going to have to read the next year. And it's a good, probably 1.5 inch thick book. And apparently has at least 257 257 chapters, because that's how high it went. These must be really short chapters, even a book that thick. It must be really short chapters. I kind of expect that they would be short. Regardless, yeah, so he's going around and he's bragging about it the entire time. It's pretty amusing. And yeah, I will admit, he looks like he dresses very dapper. I do like his fashion sense, but he comes across like he dresses that way to make up for something. You know what I mean? Not that. Get your head out of the gutter. So, yeah, like I said, I did enjoy him. He's quirky. He's a little off-putting, kind of rude. Like I said, a good antagonist for this team, but not necessarily a unique one necessarily. He's okay, you know. Nothing that got me all that excited, but like I said, he served his purpose well in this. But I don't know. Well, I will say this. The most interesting thing that they did with him was he had a little, I don't know what you would call it. It's like a platform that had his name on it. And he has it just so he can put one foot on it and be like, hi. And then he starts speechifying with his big gestures. It's pretty funny. I will say that. That was pretty funny. So, and they did a couple shots of it with the camera right at the base of this of this platform, looking up at him. Yeah. So let's talk about Gabora. When was the last time actually Gabora was in Ultraman? It was in an Ultraman show. Let me double check that really quick. Let me see. Really? No, that's merchandise. Never mind. No, it has been a while. What? You're telling me Gabora hasn't shown up as much as I thought? Really? You're kidding me. I could have swore Gabora was a more popular kaiju than that. The last time Gabora was in anything was the movie Shin Ultraman. And before that, he's only appeared two other times, in the original and in Ultraman the Ultimate Hero, Ultraman Power, whichever name you prefer, the American show. You're kidding me. I guess I've just Gaboro to me has just always been one of the more iconic for me kaiju from the original show. So I guess I just figured he had appeared more often than that. Huh. All right. Somebody wants me to acknowledge them in the chat. There you go. All right. Anyway, so Subaraya decided to go a little wild with Gabora in this episode. Yeah, really, really wild. So Gabora got an upgrade in this. He could now spin his frill around and fly like a helicopter. This at once seems incredibly logical. And at the same time, it's like, how come nobody thought of this sooner? All right. Didn't exactly see that one coming, but there you go. He's also confused. The synopsis I read confuses him for bamboo, but the subtitles I saw on the episode tonight said that that it was supposed to be like the tip of the iceberg monster or something like that, which was a tiny bit odd, I thought, but it made sense. And it's a nice way to present Gabora in a bit of a different way this time around. And it was a nice prop. That looked like a real prop there. Now, with all of the stuff going on with Ryonji, although it's Ryonji, enraged, he didn't seem all that angry to me, but maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. So Eh, excuse me. Sorry. Mm. But yeah, more annoyed. Maybe it should have been Ryonji, comma annoyed or perturbed or vexed. I don't know. But he does get a bit of his of comeuppance because he tries to tell everybody what to do, but he's clearly a fool. And then he makes a bad call because he thinks, oh, Gabora is attacking this plant because he wants to eat electricity. And funny enough, Serato is like eats electricity. I think that's a different kaiju, implying that he's got some of his memory is kind of sort of coming back there, which is interesting. All that to say, he ends up being wrong. And I think the implication is that Gabora is trying to eat the, I think it's supposed to be the radiation because he's called the uranium monster. There's two titles, by the way, because one of them is when Ryonji calls him the iceberg monster. But yeah, so weirdly enough, it feels like the Ultraman action in this is weirdly short and comes pretty late in the episode. I felt like, but we get to the end of this and we get a pretty decent fight. Volgenus is deployed basically instantly. Goes in, he does his thing, and it helps out a little bit. And then ends up combining like you would expect. Now, we do get the bit where Gabora uses it, puts his frills together, uses it like a drill, as we've seen before. And the funny thing was he kind of stabs Omega and then spins him into the air, which is kind of wacky. And then he starts spinning the frill like a helicopter and flies up to get them both up there. And I'm going to be honest, the effects for that looked awkward. They looked weird. Wasn't a fan of those. And then Volgenus and Omega combine, and then they go off and they cut off the frill on him, which is interesting that they got the frill, but bringing that trident looking thing down, but it doesn't cut off his head. That was a little odd. And then it looks like they try to chop the head off and he just blows up because I guess they don't want to destroy the suit or get too violent, because this isn't Showa Ultraman where especially in the 70s, where we're going to get super gruesome and have kaiju get their carotid arteries cut and then they bleed all over, or decapitations and various forms of dismemberment that look like they belong in Mortal Kombat. R.I.P. Kerry Takagawa, by the way. He will be missed. Hiroyuki Takagawa. He will be missed. Your soul is mine. All right. So, yeah. It was okay. It was okay. It was nice seeing Gabora again. For sure. It was okay. And then we get the wrap up and Ryonji eats some crow and all that fun stuff. And, it was all right. And then we get to the actual end where the other Serato appears. And this time he actually talks to Serato and basically says, you sure you want to do that? And then he just disappears. All right, so we're creating some intrigue in what has otherwise been a fairly average episode. Okay. So I'm not entirely sure what to do with that. I still think, because we had time travel last week, that this is Serato from the future. Perhaps trying to warn his past self about something. That's my theory, and I'm going to stick to it. We don't know yet. We don't have a whole lot of information to go off of. Either that, or maybe it's something in Serato's subconscious. I'm willing to go with that as well, but I'm sticking with time travel. Now, we saw the preview for next week, and unless they're keeping it secret, I don't see a crossover. And that leaves me a little bit concerned. Well, maybe not concerned, disappointed. I would like to see a crossover, a traditional crossover with Ultraman Arc. If it's not next week, I have a feeling the only other, because I'm expecting them, as I said last week, that this show is going to have a 2-part finale. It'll have to be episode 23. because otherwise, if what I think is going to happen happens, there's no way they're going to, there's no way they can get it in because it's 25 episodes. So my prediction is in 2 weeks, we'll have a crossover. We'll find out if I'm right or not. All right. Now, let's move on to Kamen Rider Zest. So this is episode 13, case 13, if you want to call it that. And I get the point of what they were doing here, but given the fact that this is going to be a 50 episode show, and we decide to put our hero in a pretty dire predicament, put him in a pretty low point, but it's only episode 13, and then resolve that really fast, I thought that was a little bit odd. So it starts off with a fight with Nox Knight, who still remains an absolutely incredible design. And he breaks all the capsums, saying something about how now you're going to learn how horrifying they really are. Okay, my dude. And then basically breaks the belt for Zest, for Baku. And then he unhenshins. Dehensions, whatever the correct term should be. And he wakes up and he has this crisis where he's like, I failed. I don't know what I can do. And then we see some of those smaller meteors hit this Cosmos Space Center. And I'm confused as to whether or not it happened in real life or if it's just supposed to be the dream. It seems like it's supposed to be real life. And if that's the case, you think people would be a little more shocked by it, take it a little bit more seriously. I don't know what's going on there. Regardless, that's what's going on. So he has this crisis that he goes through and he navigates it, trying to figure it out. And in true tokusatsu fashion, he goes and he talks to the kid who's the one he's been trying to, he's the dreamer that he's trying to protect this week. The Kenny, the common Kenny, as I like to call them. And the kid says, like, oh, you remember what you told me in the last episode? Because apparently liking something is a talent. That's such a weird lesson to me. I don't get it. And I was like, what did you like? It's like, oh, I like spy movies. At least they nerd out a little bit. And that is what gives Baku the encouragement to get back in the hero game. Okay. Seems a little odd. Now, I understand that the capsums are dependent on his mental state, so he's got to have a good mental state. And so he goes back in and he gets a new capsum. It's not any of the ones he had before. He gets a brand new one. By the way, his sister now secretly knows his secret identity, which is an interesting way to create some dramatic tension in this show. I'm still not entirely sure why she hasn't said anything, but sure. Anyway, so he does that. Like I said, this is all. This show is already really fast paced, and this plot point feels a little bit rushed, and it's just going through, and he's just getting it all taken care of. And I'm like, what is this going to leave? Because I don't know. I guess I'm thinking of. And Chris, if you're watching this or listening to this, get the freaking episodes edited, because I'm thinking of Kamen Rider Phase, where they dragged a lot of stuff out to pad it out to 50 episodes. But I'm just wondering what their plan is with this. There's still plenty of unanswered questions, but what exactly are we going to do with the characters here if we had this low point for Baku and he kind of gets over it, like I said? Well, now he's got a purple capsum, a gachapon. It's so blatantly toyetic, it's almost painful, to be honest. So he puts that one in, and he's got these weird pylon things. I don't know exactly how to describe them. They look like, if you guys ever look up the Marvel character Claw with a K, it was kind of a lame villain that Marvel later figured out how to make super cool. I mean, he's got this weird kind of like cannon arm looking thing. And this power up for Zest looks like that. Only both hands, and it allows him to control gravity, which I figured because they called it gravity, and I figured that's what we're gonna get at. He's got gravity control powers. Oh, I should also mention, and as soon as I saw this, I'm like, I'm gonna be right, aren't I? I called it last week. I'm gonna reiterate this. I called this last week, but it's revealed that the Nightmare, our monster of the week, is in fact the freaking meteor, which looks way too smooth and round to be a meteor. That's a freaking moon. It's the opposite of the original Star Wars. That's no moon. No, it actually is a moon. Except in this case, I guess it's like, that's no moon. It's a nightmare. Whatever. Although, to be honest, was not a fan of the effects for the meteor nightmare. Looked kind of suspect. The ambition of this show is exceeding its grasp once again, I think. Not only that, who came up with that design? Like giving him like the goofy little arms that hang out like this and kind of come around and like they're going to collapse into it. It looked like something that a kid would come up with in art class. It looked so goofy. It looked goofy. They tried to give it a scary face, which only added, but it's only like right here in the middle of its clearly moon face. And it looked weird. Was not a fan. It's a great idea. It is an absolutely great idea. I felt like this episode, even though it's Kamen Rider, wanted to be an Ultraman episode for a few minutes here. It was a little bizarre because a meteor kaiju, a meteor monster sounds more like something you would see in an Ultraman show. But because, as I have been saying when we were doing the live reactions, because this is a dream-themed Kamen Rider show, that gives them the freedom to do a lot of things that they wouldn't have been able to do before. Well, not before, but be able to do. They can get absolutely wild in this. And yeah, there you go, a meteor monster. But what did I call last week? I said this episode's going to, I was speaking of last week, this episode's going to end with that meteor getting Rider kicked, isn't it? And it just blows up. I was right, because that is what happens here. Baku uses his gravity controlling powers after a quick little fight with the Nox Knight, where he's able to hold him off, and then launches himself into space because he could do that, and then makes like a gravity bubble or something, and then Rider kicks the gravity bubble through the moon meteor. The moon meteor monster, until I know its name, it is the moon meteor monster because alliteration is awesome. And then his Rider kick. There's a clip of Kamen Rider Kuga who does a Rider kick and it looks like a nuke goes off. In this case, Zest is like, hold my sake, and he makes a black hole with his Rider kick because of course he does. And then that sucks the moon meteor monster into it. Unfortunately, also sucks him in. And he goes missing. And then we see him at the end of the episode, he's still asleep and his sister can't wake him up. And I'll get to the disconcerting ending here in a few minutes. But then we see Nox be confronted by Zero, and they clearly know each other, and he accuses Zero of just sacrificing agents to get the mission done. He says, well, you're entitled to think that. And then he does try to shoot him with his very obvious giant Nerf gun. And then Zero pulls out a sword and blocks everything, which is cool and all, and then disappears in mist. Okay. So they have a history. He's calling what Zero's doing into question, which I think is supposed to set up the ending here because we have this interesting ending where Baku's sister says, I can't wake him up. What's going on? And he says, basically, I'll tell you what's going on, but you have to keep it to yourself because if you don't, I will kill you. And the episode just, if I'm interpreting this correctly, the episode ends with her just nodding. And that's it. Okay. Things have gotten a little more complicated, a little bit more intense. I give it credit. We've solved one emotional issue, and now we've got another problem to deal with. Credit where credit is due. They're at least keeping things going. I'm just wondering if they're going to be able to maintain the momentum for 50 episodes. That's all I'm saying. So, like I said, it's impressive. Just when I think the show is starting to run out of gas a little bit, it revs that engine a little bit more and keeps it going. Credit where credit is due. But I will admit, Ryder kicking the moon meteor monster was not exactly on my bingo card, but it was on my bingo card. I wasn't expecting it to be the monster. That was a nice twist I wasn't thinking of. But again, I do think the show's ambition is exceeding its grasp a little bit. If they want to do something this wild, I think they might want to invest in better effects, maybe. Or maybe try to reel in their ambition a little bit. I'm not sure. But it does seem like both of these shows had slightly suspect minimum effects at some points, while amidst what was otherwise pretty solid work, which is interesting. Which one did I think was better? Probably Zest, but only for the craziness of a rider kick making a black hole and going through a moon meteor monster. Honestly, that's what I would say. All right. You have a few comments in the chat, most of which are from Edwin. Let's see what he has to say. The pain is the hero's gain. To have you react to Kamen Rider Ghost, it'd be hilarious. Well, we'll see. Oh, he had another comment before that. Shubro knows and shows. What? I'm a little confused on that one. Let's see. And then this is after the Kamen Rider Ghost reaction. This is Claw, Andy Serkis. Yes, but they don't do the wackiness with Andy Serkis's claw like they do in the comics. I'm just saying. And then Danny Phantom idea of dealing with a meteor. Can't blow it up. Make the Earth intangible. Actually, that's kind of clever. I like that idea. Reminds me a very tiny bit of Gorath, the movie Gorath, in that they find out that there's a rogue planet that's going to hit the Earth and destroy it. So what's their solution? Move the Earth. How do we move the Earth? Put giant rockets in Antarctica. Yeah, look it up. It's a kind of a crazy movie. The figure? Which figure? I got a ton of figures back there, so I don't know which ones you're talking about. You're going to have to be a little bit more specific. Let's see, Edwin. Oddly enough, the Danny Phantom wiki calls it a Gorath reference. Danny Phantom, they did part of the plan in the article. Thank you. Thank you. I love how I said it must be a Gorath reference, and I end up being right. That's just great. And I've never seen Danny Phantom. No, well, not a full episode anyway. The one that's standing menacingly. You mean this thing? This thing? Please clarify if that's what you're talking about. Oh, that it is that is the age. It's like a giant Age of Extinction Grimlock. It's a transformer, but it doesn't transform. It's just a big figure. It's not that impressive of a figure. It looks really tall, but it's barely got any detail, and it just has hip and shoulder joints. So yeah, it's not great. I was given to me for free because I had a friend who didn't want it anymore. He's like, "Oh, fine, I'll just give it a home." Yeah, so he just stands there. Not one of my favorite figures in the world, to be honest. Yeah, I don't. I've occasionally thought about parting with it myself. So yeah, there you go. Nothing all that special. See, next week Zest learns Thunderbolt, but what if the bad dreams, nightmares have to exist, but not used like this? Kind of like dreams and nightmares in the Sandman. Maybe there are a lot of unanswered questions. Like I said, they have to fill out 50 episodes with this. So they got to keep adding stuff in order to have the material that they need to get to 50 episodes. I'm just saying. So we'll find out next week, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure. Let me, speaking of next week, let me double check the Ultraman Omega. What it says for the Ultraman Omega. Sorry, trying to do this live. The Ultraman Omega episode for next week. I did see a title. Do they have yeah, they do have a synopsis. The title is He Who Looks to the Stars. And the synopsis is humanity has launched an international squad of larger scale than the KSCT. That's a bit of an awkward sentence. Than the KSTC to counter the frequent kaiju disasters occurring worldwide. Meanwhile, Ayumu guides Serato and Kosei toward the mysterious signal. What they find isn't a kaiju, but an important message about Serato's past left by someone who helped him right after he fell to Earth. So we're going to get I'm guessing we're going to get a major revelation next week on Omega. That sounds exciting. All right, a couple more comments here from Edwin, and then I'm signing off for the night. Let's see. Oh, that's not it. Here we go. Zero Code Zeroider reminds me too much of Alan Blunt, awful handler / director of espionage agency that does slimy and cold things with their operative. If no one knows the character I'm referring. Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to be curious as to how much of that is true, and how much of it is maybe Knox's perception. I'm expecting that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, because Zero didn't exactly tell him he was wrong. Just saying. All righty. And with that, I think we will close up shop. Like I said, solo stream this week. Hopefully we'll get the gang back together next week. We're getting into the home stretch for Omega, and we still got a long way to go with Zest. Honestly, by January, these streams, if we keep them up, are just going to be reactions to Zest. It's going to be crazy. And then I think after Zest is over, we'll talk about whether or not we want to keep these going. So we'll find out. I really want to know what next year's Ultra Series is going to be, because it's the 60th anniversary. So I'm hoping it's something big. We should know hopefully in the next month or two. We'll see. We'll see. Bye. Thank you for listening to Henshin Power V3, a podcast produced and hosted by Nathan March and
Christopher Reiner
and Jake Hamber.
If you'd like to send us feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So email us at henshin.power.v3@gmail.com.
Follow us on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Thank you, Danny DeMana, where our handle is @HenshinPowerB3, and join our official Facebook groups, Power Rangers Legacy and the Marco Out Lounge. We also have a Discord server called the Marco Out Lounge. Check the show notes for links to all of them.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other great podcatchers. The podcast logo was designed by Rebecca Hutchins. Follow her on Instagram at super_r_illustrations.
Our theme song is a Joe the Hero remix by GVG Kid, which is based on a track from the video game Beautiful Joe.
All film and audio clips belong to their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended or implied.
Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Podchaser to spread the word about the show. And until next time,
Schwatch!